of qualifications, we generally require a copy of the certificate. Now, we are aware that this is not always possible. Many refugees, basically, their only possessions are the clothes that they have on them. How do we go about this? We can give a recognition of a qualification if the refugee asserts to have a qualification coming from a certain country. But the problem is this: once we give a confirmation from our end attesting that the alleged qualification of a refugee is recognized and would be of a specific level on the Maltese qualifications framework, the absence of a certificate, the original certificate that he obtained from his own country, will be a hindrance for him to find employment, because an employer, although he has a confirmation from me saying that his qualification would be of a certain level, there is no guarantee that this refugee actually has that qualification. So right now, the Maltese ENIC-NERIC, the Recognition Center for Qualifications, is undergoing joint projects and studies with fellow partner centers on how to go about recognizing undocumented refugees. When I say undocumented, I'm not referring to the fact that they don't have a passport, but they don't have the academic qualification. The qualifications passport for refugees, which Alexandros mentioned previously, is one of the approaches. And as he was mentioning, a facet of this is actually creating a resume of the experience that the refugee has. Work experience, we review the education that he has alleged, and we try to frame it to explain to potential employers how this education would be of help to them. This is obviously a work in progress that I'm mentioning now. And I say work in progress because undocumented refugees, that is refugees with no qualifications, do not come for our services. And the reason I say that is because quite often many refugees are hesitant to disclose any form of documentation because they are not too sure how this may affect their application for international protection. So the few people that do come for recognition of our services, refugees, are people who already have international protection guaranteed. But for those whose application is still pending, they will withhold presenting any certification that they may actually have or approaching us to try and guide them. Now if you can go to my next slide. Here is some statistics of how many applications we receive. As you can see, it is a very small amount.
I'm sorry to ask, but it seems we cannot actually see the slide you're presenting. We are seeing the cover slide. I don't know, perhaps if you have to click yes, perfect. Now we can see it. Thank you.
Okay, I'll stay on a word because I don't know what you're seeing. I'm just seeing jumbled pictures here.
We see applications received.
Okay. Did you see the previous slide? The previous slide was what I was mentioning. So let's just stick to applications received. As you can see, there's a steady increase of applications, but the volume is very low, as I said. And that is linked with the type of migrants that are coming to Malta. Because you control your desktop. Okay.
Stefan, I think all is fine.
Okay. Right, okay. Can slide down?
Yeah, now we're back at the first slide. Yes, applications received. Perfect.
Okay. So right now we have, I haven't updated the stat of late, but we have about 12 pending right now. Now this next slide is an indicator of the countries of origin of the refugees that we're coming. And the main country, as you can see, is Libya, which we have received over the last 3 years, 22 refugees applying for recognition of qualifications to us. That is not to say that those are 22 qualifications that we have recognized. We have encountered certain difficulties which I would like to share. When we were trying to attest and understand what was the nature of the qualification, we had found quite a lot of difficulties with official authorities. Not just in approaching them, but we also found conflicting positions from one official authority to another official authority. And this was a problem that we realized is shared with many of our recognition partners. We had consulted repeatedly other recognition centers, and we had noticed a pattern of inconsistency in the information being received. So this is unfortunate because it is a problem that filters down to the applicant, to the student. I can go into my next slide. Now, this is an indicator of the kind of level of qualification that we're receiving. For the most part, the recognition of qualification that we have given would be at about level 6, bachelor's level. And that is encouraging. If you have students with qualifications which is close to compulsory education, so this would be at EQF level 3 and level 4, quite often it would be a very difficult thing for the student to pursue further education. And the reason is because if he is to pursue ongoing compulsory education, the schools in Malta will have to evaluate what he has studied so far. And they can only do that by understanding the syllabus in their country. That is one challenge. The second challenge, and is a point that was already raised previously by previous speakers, is the language. So you can have a person, and not just coming from the usual refugee countries, could be even from someone in Europe, any third country national. If there's a problem in following the syllabus in Malta, and in Malta we have two official languages, Maltese and English, but English is very predominant in the lesson. You cannot follow English. It doesn't matter if your syllabus is of an equal level or even higher quality than the Maltese syllabus. Failure to follow the lesson is going to be a struggle. We have noticed that actually this is a problem even for Maltese students at university level. An inability to have a good command of the English language has a negative effect on the success in obtaining a higher education. This is just a quick stat of the third country nationals that we are receiving qualifications from. Pakistan and the Philippines are very predominant here. We notice a lot of an increase from Serbia, and we've also noticed a recent trend recently from South America. People submitting qualifications from Venezuela and Colombia in particular. On this slide, what you will notice is the extraordinary increase of third country national applications we are receiving. They are actually outnumbering not just Maltese qualifications, but EU qualifications in general. So the way that we as an ENIC-NARIC, a recognition center, have to operate, we had to review our processes because to process new qualifications that we've never seen before, in the same procedures that we had before, it would have meant that it would take 4, 5, 6, 7 months to process a qualification. For people who are waiting a statement from us so that they can pursue their education, so that they can start their scholastic year with their fellow students, or they can apply for a job before their visa expires, it was important that we devise new effective ways where we can give recognition statement in a way which is safe for the end user, that is for the employer or the higher education institution, that they have a guarantee that the information we are giving is correct. We are satisfied with the systems that we have because we are aware that our statements are in line with that of our ENIC-NARIC partners. All the appeals that have been made against our judgments have been proven, won in our favor. But it is also a struggle. It is a struggle to give a service for qualifications which we are not familiar with. And as I said, a second challenge apart from the language for refugees and third country nationals in general is that it is important to give a timely assessment. If you leave any person pending the recognition of his qualification, he is essentially in limbo. He cannot find employment, he cannot go to work, and there is a risk that even their stay in Malta physically could be compromised. Now, if I can go back. I'll just give a quick some information about what are the rights of a refugee for education in Malta. Refugees are entitled to free primary and secondary education. However, students, refugees, that is, under the age of 18, undertaking studies up to undergraduate, we call them foundation courses, are also entitled to free education. At university level, third country nationals would have to pay. So essentially we have one university in Malta, the University of Malta, and this, in my country, we are fortunate that education is free. So this treatment is the same for all EU citizens. For third country nationals, generally they would have to pay. For refugee students, there is a dispensation for them from paying, but this is something that is in the sole exclusive discretion of the university. It has nothing which we as an e-Connect Center have any say in. I think that is all I have to say at this stage, but I will welcome any questions that you would like to make later on.
Thank you very much, Stefan, for addressing this important topic of recognitions of qualifications. It's not an easy one, and it's definitely one of the first challenges that is usually mentioned when it comes to now it's very encouraging to hear about the efforts that you're already making in terms of, for example, waiving some of the fees for the refugees who have difficulties, paying for that, and your efforts also in terms of, outreach and informing refugees about the possibilities. But rightly, as you said, I can understand that it must be very difficult to work, with what you on the sense of refugees who actually don't have, their certificates with them. So I can clearly see this as a challenge, and good to hear that you're working on that. And the other challenge that you mentioned, like what do you do with these qualifications you're very unfamiliar with, where you then on top receive a lot of inconsistent or contradicting information. I can see that that's a difficulty as well, but it's good to hear that you're working together with other centers to share experience and expertise here. And I'm sure together we can move. Stefan, we will now have a quick look at the chat because I see there are a few questions that came in. I think actually there's one for you, Stefan, so perhaps we will start with that. So the question is about the waiver for the fees. So would the waiver be for financial constraints with refugee status only, or also for other protection statuses? Is it also applicable to asylum seekers, so people who do not yet have received the refugee status?
The waiver, I want to be clear, is a full waiver. So it is not a partial waiver. So any waiver we give, it means there's no charge whatsoever. Our position is that if you're a refugee or having any form of protection, you're entitled to this waiver. With regards to asylum seekers, what we do is, and I'll be honest with you, it's not just to asylum seekers. We extend this policy also to Maltese citizens who are unemployed looking for work. You have to appreciate that the service of recognition of qualifications predominantly is one, to continue your studies at higher education, but also to find employment. And it would be a bit absurd that someone who's in financial difficulties wants to enter the employment market and cannot do so because he needs a recognition statement, has to pay. So this waiver is extended to refugees, anyone with form of international protection. And then at our discretion, but we discuss with the NGOs, is anyone who is unemployed, but is we are know that they are not in a financially sound position, or asylum seekers. Now, with asylum seekers, as I said, it's a bit more delicate, but we extend it on humanitarian grounds. They are few and far between, but in terms of policy and in terms of precedent, we have given the waiver in the past. But obviously, we have to be careful just so that there is no abuse. But we are very flexible on this.
Okay, thank you very much for this clarification, Stefan. It makes a lot of sense, and it's good to see that you're very pragmatic and trying to support those who need it. So thanks, Stefan. I see there was another question for Alexandros. Alexandros, could you maybe switch on your video and audio? So the question is about similar, actually, the sponsorship scheme. So could you expand on the waiver obtained for third country nationals or refugees at master's level? Were the fees subsidized by other students, or how does this work when the fees are waived for refugees or TCNs? Alexandros. Alexandros, we can't hear you very well. Sorry, is your volume on?
Can you hear me better now? Yes.
Yes, thank you.
Okay. What I said is that this was done through a personal communication of the student to the managing authorities of the master course. So they were not subsidized by other students. They were not paid by other students. It was only a 50% reduction of the money that the specific student had to pay. So this was the way it works. We are more sensitive to, in all universities, to situations like that. So instead of paying the full amount, the student was just asked to pay the 50% of that amount.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you, Alexandros.
Yes.
If I'm not mistaken, I think these were the questions. So I'd like to thank all the speakers in the webinar, Stefan, Alexandros, Laura, and Therese. Thank you so much for your contribution. I think it was really good to get, a better sense. Yes, thank you, Alexandros, and particularly to hear from the ground what's happening in Malta, Greece, and Italy. It makes it a lot more concrete for us. Now, before we conclude, I just would like to say that this is the first webinar in a series of webinars that we're organizing under the TandEM project. The next webinar is on 15 October and is going to look at changing the narrative on migration by engaging young third country nationals and their peers. The third one on 4th November, we look at promoting interfaith dialogue. And the last one on 11 November, we look at setting up student mentorship schemes. So you're all invited, of course, to follow us with the TandEM project for the next webinars. And you can also, of course, have a look at our website. So with this, I thank again all the speakers and all the participants, and I wish you a very beautiful afternoon. Thank you and goodbye.